Clemson 29, Ohio State 23, the latest in the series between the two teams, 3 in the playoffs and 5 overall now as we go through history. Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence coming into the season 1 versus 1A in the quarterback rankings by most. Fields, I thought, played a really strong playoff game last year. He had the one bad interception by Isaiah Simmons. The final play was a miscommunication. But other than that, considering he was playing with a compromised knee, we talked about it a number of times during the offseason. Wow, wait till we can see Justin Fields in a playoff situation healthy and able to give that full mobility and threat to the defense. But now he comes in with a sprained thumb and not playing well against Ohio State's best 2 opponents. So Trevor Lawrence would seem to be the known commodity, and Justin Fields, for as talented as he is, a bit more of a wild card or X factor.
Yeah, I think that the knocks on Justin Fields, and I wrote about this last week, I feel like they've gone a little too far this year. You're right. He did not play well against Northwestern. 114 yards, completing 44% of his passes. It just simply wasn't a good performance. And, fortunately for Ohio State, they got that run game going and really committed to it because, that's what ended up winning them the game. But, I think some of that has to do with Northwestern's defense. But I think some of that is, as I said before, Justin Fields just not being in a rhythm of not playing each week. Even in the Michigan State game, he, had to get his legs really going before we saw him pick it up in the pass game. The Indiana game, I think, is a different story because he still threw for 300 yards and had, I believe, 3 total touchdowns. The interceptions were bad, but I don't think he'd seen a defense that had done some of those things before. I think it was more of a learning experience than it was, a questioning of Justin Fields. If 300 yards and 3 touchdowns is a bad day, I think most quarterbacks are going to take that. Now, rolling that into this game, he has to be at his best. And, this Clemson defense is at least as good as Northwestern's. Obviously the talent, at least on paper of this Clemson defense is higher than Northwestern. So on the biggest stage, he needs to play at least as good as he did last year, if not better. The interceptions are going to be big. Ohio State, 2 turnovers last year, really only ended up costing them, I guess, at the end of the game when it, directly took points off the board. The other interception that you mentioned, the bad one, was I believe the defense held Clemson to a punt, but it's still an opportunity lost to score points. I don't think Ohio State can afford that in this game. They need to not only limit the turnovers, but force turnovers of their own, something they weren't able to do last year. And Justin Fields is key, obviously, on the offensive side of the ball and not turning the ball over. I also think you mentioned the thumb, but we didn't see him use his legs a lot because of that knee issue last year. He did run some, and usually it was for minimal gains, but I think that could be something that could be big here. And, similarly to how Trevor Lawrence was last year, Justin hasn't run a ton this year. He has when he had to. And against Michigan State, he obviously showed off some of that mobility. That could be something, if they can get him going rushing, get Trey Sermon and maybe Master Teague as well going rushing, then that would open things up in the pass game you expect. So I'll be interested to see, where that thumb is and how they plan to attack. Ryan Day said after the Northwestern game, when they kept throwing the ball in the first half, that he wanted to stay aggressive. You have to stay aggressive against a defense like that. And then he was asked this week about why does staying aggressive mean passing the ball? And I think he kind of either didn't understand where the question was coming from because it was clearly in reference to his comments earlier, or he sort of dodged it a little bit by saying, you can be aggressive in a lot of different ways and things like that. And I think that's what Ohio State has to do, is figure out what works, whether that's, Justin Fields passing, Justin Fields running, the running backs running. They have to figure out that and then, be aggressive that way. And then if Clemson starts to take it away, then you find the next thing. So if Fields' thumb is okay, as he said, he gave a very short, I'll be fine by Friday answer yesterday when asked about it. If his thumb's okay, then, that's an advantage towards Ohio State. If it's still bugging him, because you clearly saw it was in the second half against Northwestern, again, I think you have the rushing ability of him and the running backs that can at least take some pressure off the passing attack.
And looking at the Indiana game, to your point, he played really well in that game, aside from the 3 picks. Now, when you throw 3 picks, you're killing 3 drives. That could be monumental, of course, but he played really well. And then I also make a distinction between the picks in that one of them is alarming to me. alarming is way too much of an overstatement, but in regards to being able to read the defense, he just didn't read it well, threw late down the middle of the field, didn't see one, versus the other two was just basically being an athlete and thinking I can do more than I can do. And just that seems like it's basically a conversation to say, Justin, we're fine. You don't need to just throw the ball away or take a sack. You don't need to play hero when you're wrapped up by a 280-pound defensive lineman and you think you can make a throw 30 yards. Don't make that throw. And that seems to be very correctable versus the other one, if it's ability to read the defense and trying to develop his game there, I don't know that can be corrected with a conversation or a couple practices.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, that point, because in his 2 years ago, in his first year as a starting quarterback, his first year at Ohio State, Ryan Day on more than one occasion, and Justin Fields also brought this up, said that his favorite throws of Fields were the ones where he just threw the ball away because there was nothing available. And that was something I think that was not only said in the quarterback room, but said publicly just to reemphasize it. You got a young quarterback making his first career starts on a very talented team. And as talented as he is, you want to make sure he doesn't make the crucial mistake. And throughout the course of the season, he didn't. There were a couple throws in a few games that could have been intercepted, but you could say that about any quarterback. And then obviously he makes the mistake against Clemson, and then there's the second pick, which really wasn't his fault. And I feel like this year he's gained more confidence, gained more control of the offense. So that conversation probably didn't happen as often. And then you go into an Indiana game that's a big game at the time, a top 15 game. And there'd been a lot of talk about Indiana and coming into Ohio Stadium, and it was the big noon kickoff game and all these things. And I think Justin Fields just felt like he needed to be the guy. The last time he was on that really big stage was the Clemson loss when he was good, but not great in the biggest moments. So, and he even admitted that he was unusually hyped up for that game and whatnot. So, I think that in and of itself is a bit of a learning process for a quarterback that, even though he's not young anymore and is confident in his ability, he still has to make those same plays. Maybe Ryan Day has to have those same conversations with him to remind him, let's just, if you have to take a sack because, there's nothing downfield and you get pressure on you, fine, we'll punt the ball. We've got one of the best punters in the country. If you have to throw the ball out of grounds, we'll live to fight another day, those type of things. And that becomes even more important against Clemson. If you can make a play, make it, but don't put the team in a bad situation. As Ryan Day said before the end of the game, don't make a bad situation worse by compounding it with a turnover.
It's one of the great kind of balancing acts in all of sports, regardless of the sport that's played. It's the risk versus reward. If you have an athlete who's too conservative, then you don't want that because they have to play loose and free, and there have to be risks to making the big play, to taking that opportunity to use your talent to do what you can do best, but minimizing that based on just the evaluation of the situation. Again, in every sport.